Please.
Hi. I wondered if you could say something about, I understand how this arrangement, what Israel does is how the U.S. sees it as beneficial to the U.S. But I wonder if you could, I don't understand how the occupation of the West Bank and Gaza benefit the U.S. And I don't know if this goes to the question of to what extent Israel is doing arbitering, or to what extent U.S. policymakers are also influenced by Israel, and I wonder if you could say something about that.
To what extent? What you say? What does it benefit the United States? Yeah. Well, actually, I don't think the United States, U.S. power systems, meaning the state, corporate sector, and so on, they probably don't care one way or another about Gaza or the West Bank. They do care, however, about a powerful Israel. And in fact, Israel becomes more powerful to the extent that it gains territory, resources, and so on. And these same power systems don't care at all about the Palestinians. I mean, there is, I mentioned one principle of international affairs, namely it's kind of like the mafia. There's another principle which has to do with human rights. You have human rights to the extent that you serve power, okay? So Palestinians have no human rights because they perform no service to U.S. power. Israel has massive human rights because it performs massive services. And you could run through them, but some of them are pretty dramatic. In fact, right now. So the U.S. and Israel attacked Gaza on December 27th, okay? On December 3rd, right in the middle of the attack, massive bombing, destruction. On December 31st, the Pentagon quietly announced that it had commissioned a German ship to bring, they said, 3,000 tons of military equipment to Israel, right in the middle of it. They said just a couple of weeks earlier they had commissioned another ship, which already presumably had delivered its material. Well, that's kind of pretty important. Here's a country that, at our service, with our, I mean, it's a U.S. attack. The jets, the helicopters, fancy weapons, and so on, mostly they come from the United States, and there's all the other support. So right in the middle of it, the U.S. is trying to bring 3,000 tons of military equipment to Israel. Actually, it didn't quite make it because the government of Greece, from where it was supposed to go, refused to allow the ship to go. Okay. That has a history too. Up until 1974, Greece was not regarded officially in the United States as part of Europe. It was regarded as part of the Near East. In 1974, something happened. The Greeks overthrew the US-backed fascist dictatorship. And at that point, the official, Greece moved from the Near East section of the State Department to the European section. Not because we liked the overthrow of the dictatorship, but because you couldn't stop it anymore. But they're still not part of the European system. Culturally and in many other ways. There is a clash of civilizations. And unlike the European Union, they did not support the atrocities in Gaza, and they prevented the ship from going. It'll go, it's a German ship. They'll find some other way to send it. But it's important. Why are they sending equipment to Israel? Well, if anybody, the few people who bothered to ask, and there weren't many, which is interesting, were instructed by the Pentagon that the material is not for the use of Israel in the assault against Gaza. They said it would get there too late because they understood that the attack would end the day before the inauguration. That's crucially important. You have to make sure that not to raise the marginal possibility that Obama might say something about it. So you had to stop the attack right before the inauguration, which it did. So the ship would get there too late for this attack, maybe for the next one. But there was a reason, an important reason that the Pentagon gave. those arms are being pre-positioned for use by the U.S. military. In other words, this is just one element of how Israel provides a major military base for the United States, right at the edge of the most crucial region of the world, the oil-producing region. So it's not just a place to store things. It also has a very powerful military force of its own, thanks to its alliance with the United States. Believe it or not, the Israeli Air Force and armored forces are larger and technologically more advanced than any NATO power outside the U.S. Of course, not by its own resources, because it's an offshoot of the U.S. power. And it's a base for projection of U.S. power, which will be used for what will be called stabilizing the Middle East, or something like that, meaning aggression, violence, and terror, and so on. Well, the arms that go to Israel, which are huge, not only strengthen the Israeli military and provide prepositioning for further U.S. aggression, but have other values. So when the U.S. provides arms to Israel, that provides a pretext to sell less efficient arms to Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf dictatorships, from which the U.S. Arms industry, military industry, makes huge profits. So they love this arrangement. Furthermore, the arms can be tested against live subjects, so you learn something about how they work, you improve them. And furthermore, Israel has its own arms industry, a significant one. And it's so closely linked to the United States that one of their major military industries transferred its headquarters to the United States. These are just like cousins. I mean, tiny one and a huge one. Furthermore, Israel provides important advantages for U.S. intelligence and even for U.S. Operations. There's a very interesting article that just appeared in Middle East Policy, one of the main Middle East journals, discussing how Baghdad is being redesigned by U.S. forces along the lines that Israel has pioneered in the West Bank. Baghdad is being partitioned into, disconnected areas by walls and all sorts of other gating, to try to keep people under control, which is an application, the author suggests, professor out in the West, that is plausibly is just an application of Israeli strategies. They apply techniques which we then use. They do perfection of weapons. Furthermore, Israel is a high-tech center, and U.S. high-tech corporations like that. You take a look at investment in Israel. Investment by Microsoft, Hewlett-Packard, Intel, and so on is going up very fast in Israel, Warren Buffett and others, because it's valuable to have a high-tech center with trained people, and they can do your work for you, and so on and so forth. And we can run through the list. It performs many services. It's performed other services, like when the U.S., I mentioned that the Reagan administration had to find ways around the boycott of South Africa. Well, Israel helped out, helped Britain too, provided means to provide arms and other services. The same was true in Central America. The United States was carrying out a major terrorist war against Central America in the 1980s, but Congress did impose some restrictions, and they could the U.S. has a terrorist network, terrorist states. Israel's one of them. Taiwan's another. Britain, to an extent, is another. And they could fill the gap. So you want to carry out genocidal attacks against the Mayan Indians and, or train the Contras or something. Okay, Israel can come in and do it. That's very valuable. You have an imperial system. You want mercenaries. Small countries hire mercenaries. Big countries like ours hire mercenary states. And that works. And we can run down the list. I mentioned East Timor, right? Congress imposed some limits. As the atrocities were really reaching their peak in 1978, Congress imposed some limits on selling arms to Indonesia. That's the Carter administration. They appealed to Israel to send U.S. jet bombers to Indonesia, okay, get around the congressional ban. And there's a long list of things. It's a very valuable ally for the Godfather. If you contrast it with the Palestinians, they perform no services at all. In fact, they have no human rights. In fact, they perform negative services. They harm U.S. power by arousing what's standard racist terminology is called the Arab Street. You know, when there's feelings in New York, you don't call it the New York Street. But the Arab Street, you know, the people of the countries, they get upset when the Palestinians are being crushed, and that causes problems for the dictators who run the country, the kind that Asaf was talking about. So they kind of have negative value, hence negative human rights. And I think, so in itself, you know, if the U.S. decided to do what they did in Indonesia and just tell Israel to pull out of the territories, Intel, Microsoft, Lockheed Martin wouldn't care that much. It's not a huge issue to them. But to have a powerful Israel is pretty important. And since Palestinians have no rights, well, what happens sort of follows.